last lesson, we updated the user interface to accommodate other types of commands. In this lesson, we're going to write the code necessary to get the post commands to work. Included in this will be ensuring that we identify what code should be in the user interface and what code should be pushed into the library. Now, this is lesson number 7 in our complete course on building a Postman clone. This course has been designed to be beginner-friendly and an example of what you might put in a portfolio. Although, don't just directly put this course in your portfolio. Your portfolio needs to be uniquely yours, not just a copy of someone else's work. If you want to go further in C#, I encourage you to go to imtimcorey.com and check out the DevPass. Once you get the DevPass, I would recommend starting with a master course to get job ready and then fill in your gaps with one or more of the dozens of topic-specific courses included. The DevPass will get you up to speed and keep you up to date in your software development career. So let's go over to Visual Studio. Here we have our project open, kind of where we left off last. I haven't changed anything since then. So we have the drop down here, which will give us both the, let's just run it. It'll give us both the get and the post. So we can drop down here, get and post. We can paste the URL in here. We hit go, and it will give us the results in this window. But we need to kind of enable this post. Right now we only have get working. So let's enable post in our back end. So let's go first to our view code here. And this is where we need to start, because when we hit the go button, well, that's the call API click. And we first check to make sure the URL is valid. And then we do this call API and then select the tab, and that's it. We don't actually handle anything but get commands, because by default, this will have an action of get if you don't pass anything in. We're going to change that. So we'll have to, first of all, figure out which action to do, which means we have to read from our dropdown. Also, one other thing that we did have is when we run this, right now what happens is it highlights all of the text on the results window. We're going to change that as well. At least one of you noticed in the comments, and I want to point out how to fix that in this demo. So let's just run this and see it in action first to see that pop up. So if we go to Git and we type in our URL here or paste it in, I'm on the body right now, but if I hit go, it gets the results and it highlights them, which isn't ideal, but the reason why, let's just move this off a screen, will not stop the application. But the reason why is because we do a selected tab equals results tab, but we don't do anything else in here to kind of specify, what's being focused. So we can actually say results tab dot focus, and we can focus on the tab itself. So come back over here, go body, we'll hit go again, and now we go back to that tab, but we're not actually on the text box. We're focused on the tab itself. So this, does not then highlight the text box with all the text inside of it. So again, we hit go, it's no longer highlighted. Just a little quality of life there. So let's now figure out how to read from this dropdown. So to do that, what we're going to do is follow the same pattern we have right here. So what I want is I first want to have a value for this enum. So this enum, we're going to convert it into, is going to be an HTTP action. So I'm going to say HTTP action is going to be action. And then what we're going to do is say if, and we'll do enum dot try parse. And inside of our try parse, we're going to pass in first our dropdown, which is what? I forget the name of it. It's called HTTP verb selection. Let's say HTTP verb selection selected item. And we'll do a toString here because it's going to be an object. And then we're going to say out action. All right. And what that will do is that will give us, we're going to say equals false. There we go. Let's unpin this for a minute. It's a little long. But what this will do is this will give us the ability to, first of all, try to parse the string. So we're going to take whatever the string value is in this dropdown. So we're going to select the item. It's going to say get or post for now. And it's going to take that string value, which, yes, right now could be a null value. We're going to say that no, it's not, because we actually have a default value selected right up here. So we've already set the selected item to be get. So therefore, we can say that, yes, it's going to be not null. So we're going to take the string value of it, and we're going to try to parse it into an HTTP action. Now, I could say out HTTP action right here, but then this variable would only last inside of this if statement because of the way it's being defined. But I don't want that. I actually want it to live long term. So therefore, I'm going to say, no, I want this to be not just for a little bit. I want it to be for a longer period of time. Actually, I'm sorry. I think I misspoke here. So I was thinking this would be inside of the if statement, but it's not inside the if statement. It's actually in the declaration part of the if statement. Therefore, it would last outside this. I still prefer to create a separate declaration for it instead of an inline. It's just the way I tend to do things to make sure that it's going to live the lifespan I want it to. So in this case, it doesn't really matter. I could just declare it right in line. But in any event, I'm going to check to see if this is false. If it's false, what we're going to do is we're going to say system status dot text equals invalid, and we're going to say verb selection or HTTP verb. There you go. So invalid HTTP verb, and then we're going to return. So if we get past this if statement, that means this was true. Therefore, this action will be valid. So now we have a valid action to pass in. So we can say, is it a post? Is it a get? Is it a patch? Whatever. So we now have the right action to pass in, which we could just pass in right here. We can say, well, we could say format equals true, and then the action equals action. So now technically we're going to do a post command if we selected post from the dropdown. Here's the problem with that, though. We don't have a body to send. We're not sending any body code. So we actually need to modify our call API async before we come back here and really allow for a difference of verbs. So with that, let's go over to our Solution Explorer and go to API Access. And let's kind of reevaluate this method. This method works fine at first, but yes, we could potentially pass in other actions, and really the other action that would work would be delete, because we typically don't pass any data with delete, we just pass a URL. But otherwise, we need data. So we could expand this out, and let's just kind of visualize what that would be by saying, well, what we need really is HTTP content, and we'll call this content. So we need content we send, and we're going to say equals null because that's what we need. And we should make this nullable then because it's null. So now we can pass in the content, and that could work. But here's the thing. The data we have over here, like if we said, okay, we're going to pass in, well, what's the, by the way, we haven't changed anything yet because the interface is not changed. So we actually need to implement the interface, or we need to change the interface. We'll not do that yet. But even if we were to pass in the data, it's not string data. It's HTTP content. So we have to format it for content. We're going to format it for content. And this is where I think it's really important that you separate out your user interface code from your library code. What we don't want to do is we don't want to ask the user interface to do work that is not specific to the user interface. So we could convert our text, which comes from this body right here, which is actually our body text. We could convert the body text over to HTTP content in the code behind, but that seems like that's not really what the UI code is supposed to do. That's just generic code that we'd have to do normally. So let's figure out how to pass string information over to our library to be processed. So let's create an overload for this call API async method. So let's call API async, and then I'm going to pass in a few things. So string URL, yep, we want to pass that in. And then I want to pass in the action, and I want to pass in the content. All right, like so. And I'm not going to make the content null. I'm going to actually ask for, well, not content though. I'm going to call this string content. And we're going to say that this is not null. So let's actually move this around. So let's cut this out from here and paste it in here. So now we have an order, because we're not going to give default values to this. So you have URL, content, then we have the action, and we also want the format equals true. So let's put the format as true down at the end. So let's just grab this like so and put this at the end. And in fact, let's move that around on our call currently so that it's nearer to the bottom. And now we have an overloaded method for our call API async. So we have URL, content, action, and format. So let's move our content then up to match. So let's come up here and put our comma in and take our comma out down here. So now we have the same kind of pattern here, but this one's asking for string content and it's requiring string content. It's not nullable. And this one down here is asking for HTTP content, which is the kind of the correct thing. Now, what good is having a second method do that has the same name? Well, this will allow me to then do some work here and then call this method. So you can pass in a string, I can convert it, and then I can call this other method. So let's start with the end, which is return await. We don't need to await, but we will for now. So await, and we'll pass in this, but right now it's converting this to a string content, which is actually kind of technically almost what we need to do. So what we're going to do is say we want to take our content and say string content, which string content is a child of HTTP content, which means that you can put it into HTTP content. I'll show you that in a minute. So we're going to say let's call this JSON. Let's just call it string content. How about that? To be clear, string content equals new, and we're going to pass in our content, and then we're going to say encoding UTF-8 and JSON. So we need to bring in the using directive for this, the using system.txt. So that adds it up here. So now we have brought in and converted this to string content. We can pass the string content here, which passes it into this other method. So we now have kind of an ease of use or a helper that makes life easier, because we can pass in just a string to this call API method, and we'll convert it over to an HTTP content. Now notice this is string content I'm passing in. Like I said, this is a child of HTTP content. So I could say HTTP content, and that would still work. Notice it's going to yell at me. Now you have to say string content. He doesn't know which type of HTTP content I'm creating. But that would work. So I could do that. But in this case, I'm just going to call it string content to be clear and pass it in. So now I have reworked this call. Now this one will work, but so will this one. We can come over here and change how we do this call. Once we change, I keep forgetting, once we change the interface. So let's do control dot here to pull this up to the interface. And the same thing with this one, control dot to pull it up to the interface. And then let's go to the interface by hitting F12. And we have 3 different methods here, and one of them is incorrect. The one that's incorrect is this top one here. We no longer need that signature because we have the other 2. So now our interface is correct. We can come back over here to our code, and of course, we've got a bit of a mess here we got to clean up because we've changed the signature and how it works. So let's change this. So our API text is correct. Then we need our content, which is either string content or, notice the overload here, or it's our HTTP content. So our HTTP content or string content. Well, I want string content, which is the body text. And next up, we're going to do our action. And by the way, this is capital T. There we go. So our call is now our API URL, then our body text, and then our action. So that makes life a little easier because we can even pass in empty string, and that's okay if we want to do that. So we could say this is good. And in fact, this will work, or it should. So let's figure out if it does. Let's try it by, well, just running this. And I will pull up the right URL for this. And we're still using our JSON placeholder site, so we can paste in the JSON placeholder. I'll select post, but I have to pass in a body, which is going to be JSON data. So this is manually formatted. So this particular post command needs a title. This is my title. And it needs a body. And we can say, this is my body text. And then it needs a user ID, which we'll just say is 3. And that'll be it. So we're going to pass in this data. I'm going to copy this, just make sure I have a copy of it on my clipboard in case I have to do this over again. And I hit go. It says invalid HTTP verb. So we've got an issue. So let's figure out why. Let's come up here to our let's go with right here with a breakpoint. And we're going to hit go again. And okay, selected item. Selected item says post. And then we're trying to compare that to HTTP action, which let's check out what HTTP action has. Let's go to Solution Explorer and enums. We only have a get. Okay, there's the problem. This is why you copied that, that value. You don't want to type it again. There's post. I should have just not stopped it. So there we go. There's that. And then for our URL, I'll go to my clipboard history and paste in that URL and go to post. And now let's try it again. And now it did not do it correctly. It says it ran it and gave us back data, but that's the get command. It's not a post command. So what's going on? Well, we didn't actually change the API. So here we're still doing the get async. We're ignoring the action. So let's go ahead and fix that by making sure that we don't ignore our action. So I'm going to do a bit of work here. First, we're going to check this response out. This is an HTTP response message. Let's change this and make it nullable. And we're actually going to leave it at null for now. And then I'm going to come back here and say response again, but we're going to move that in just a minute. We're going to say switch, and let's switch on the action. And I just tabbed here, and it actually created for me the correct lineup here. So we have a get and a post right now. So we've got the get async, which is what we did, and we're putting that in response. We also have the post async with both the URL and the content. And then we have our out of range if we have anything else. So for us, that's really nice. It just wrote the code for me. But if you didn't have that, I have both GitHub Copilot turned on as well as my IntelliCode. If it didn't do that, you just type this out. That's what we're going to do, is a switch on the action. Whenever you do a switch on a enum, it's really helpful because it already populates your case statements for you, even with IntelliCode and Visual Studio. So this is going to do a get call if it's a get, and a post call with our content if it's a post. Let's see how this works just as is. So again, we can come up here, we can change to a post. Let's paste our URL, we'll paste our body, and then we'll hit go. And notice the results look very similar to the body, except we now have an ID of 101. Now, the way that JSON placeholder works is it just returns whatever you sent it, and it adds an ID, and the ID is, I believe, always going to be 101. This is not actually saving data, but it's just kind of telling us that, yes, your post command worked by giving us back the data with the ID included as well. So there we go. Our post command now works in our application. But let's go back over to our code here and note that because of the way we wrote our code, this right here is where we actually do, first of all, it's in the library, but this is where we do our actual work. So if it's a get, we do a get async. If it's a post, we do a post async, and so on. Which means that yes, and so on, patch, put, delete, these are all things that we could just add here now, and they should just work. So we've done a lot of work already. The response is always going to be a response. We can serialize or deserialize it back into a JSON element from our response, or return it as an error code if we have an error code. So that's what's up next. But for right now, we've got a working post command. We've got the drop-down working. We select get or post. We paste the URL in here. We put our body in if we have body to send to the API. We hit go, and we get the results back in our results window. So that completes all we needed to do for post. Because we set things up well, we were able to make just a few tweaks and get the rest working. Now, I do want to point out real quick the idea that you don't want to think ahead too far. Yes, you want to kind of have your head up and be thinking through, hey, how are we going to do this? But there's a downside to doing too much work, in the idea that eventually we're going to do this, so let's just go ahead and do the work now. So I didn't do a ton of work for the other types of verbs until now. So I didn't do work for post except to kind of say, hey, yeah, there's a stub in here for that. But for the most part, we're just going to call a get command. But with a few tweaks, we were able to make this work. And that's the ideal, is that you create something that is kind of heads up for the future, but you're not overly worrying about making sure you write all the code now. Otherwise, what happens is you have a whole bunch of disconnected code that half works. We don't want that. We want to have code that's written well and is efficient, and that that doesn't have any kind of orphaned elements to it. So that's it for this week. What I want you to do for your next lesson is I want you to implement the other 3 verbs. So I want you to implement put, patch, and delete. All right, we already have post, so the other 3 verbs shouldn't be too hard, but I want you to implement those, put in the drop down, and write the code for them all at once because it'll be very easy now we have the drop down set up. We're not going to do things like headers yet, so we're just going to assume that it's JSON data being sent in and that there'll be data coming back. But I want you to figure out how to do the put, the patch, and the delete in this before you come back for the next lesson. I'm going to come back in my next lesson. I will do that. I'll show you how I would do it to implement those 3 verbs. Until then, thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.